critical focus channel.
So, just a fun little video to make, I guess, and one could say it's sort of both a wish list and a most likely list merged in sort of a hodgepodge mix. I've most of the time for each faction kept current season and warbands from the recent Grand Alliance boxes out of the discussion here, as I don't really regard them as being likely to get axed anytime soon, but you never know with GW. For the out-rotated warbands currently, I've simply considered every warband as viable from the get-go and take the discussion sort of from there. Before we get going, of course, make sure to do all the YouTube clicks to help me out and increase the likelihood of the video doing well. It's sorely needed for specialist games content creators in particular. Now I'm gonna go off cam to save your eyes and start the discussion. Well, so this discussion stems of course from the fact that when second edition rolled around, GW released a couple of articles saying warbands will rotate in and out with no real timestamp as to when that might happen and no real pointers to which warbands were considered or not. The only sort of hint we have is that next to this specific text we had a picture of currently out-rotated warbands Sons of Velmun and the Gnarl Spirit pack. So let's structure this in some sort of way, and to help, as always, the excellent warband list of Underworlds DB, and that one starts with the Chaos Grand Alliance warbands, followed by Death, Destruction, and finally Order. Not starting with Order is also sort of more palatable, as there's such a huge number of warbands within that one. Chaos is by no means small, with Destruction and Death being notably smaller. This is a caveat to the discussion and points I make in this video as well. We might just because of this fact see more in-rotated and less out-rotated warbands from these two smaller Grand Alliances, simply to sort of level things out. But that is also rarely how these things work, so I wouldn't bank on it. After all, Chaos and Order are the two main antagonists of the setting, and frankly, with Death and Destruction having only occasional main villain energy. Well, anyway, let's get on with this thing. How the in-rotating will happen is also a question to ponder, of course. At its core, GW isn't though a game designer, they are a model-making company and wants to push their plastic. Will there then be 4 new Grand Alliance boxes or something slightly less hefty? Maybe, we don't really know. Well, here is the list of the current out of rotation warbands within the Chaos Grand Alliance to start us off. Magor's Fiends, Garrick's Reavers, Eyes of the Nine, the Godsworn Hunt, Grashrak's Despoilers, the Wormspat, Skitterchank's Claw Pack, the Gnarl Spirit Pack, and Skabbik's Plague Pack. I'm gonna clump up Magor's and the Reavers here. I'm not terribly hopeful that either one will get rotated in. And sure, we only have one Khorne warband as it stands, but also I think one of the Dark Oath warbands here is very likely to get back in. And on the merit of them being fairly similar, I don't necessarily think one of these will get back in. Of the two, I find it slightly more likely that Garrick will, since the number of fights in this warband is 5 and the Drom warband is 3, so there will be a bigger discrepancy between the then in rotation Khorne warbands sidelining Magor's as a result. Eyes of the Nine I could really see going back in. They're a fun bunch, albeit not terribly unlike Ephilim, but they do have a less demonic presence, and given we only have these two in the entire faction, I wouldn't mind seeing them come back with a real glow up of a war scroll from their old, rather rough faction deck and subpar stats. Godsworn Hunt, yeah, I'm very biased here obviously, but let's clump them up together with the Gnarl Spirit pack as the 2 Dark Oath warbands in this discussion, and it's made blatantly obvious that the Gnarl Spirit pack is the one more likely to get a resurgence, and they are lovely models as well. And with no Dark Oath warbands currently in rotation, together with that picture accompanying the community article, these are likely to get back into the game at some point. The Wormspat next, we have a Nurgle warband, but it's a demonic one, and this being mortals and an elite warband to boot sets them well and truly apart. I think they're not unlikely to get a resurgence, and I know a lot of people would really like them to get back in. Skitterchanks and Skabbix are the two Skaven warbands not currently in, and to be fair, very good models, both of them. There's a lot of Skaven in Underworlds though, and for one of these to get back in, I think it requires another one going the other direction. But I wouldn't bet against just that. I have a really hard time choosing between these two, but I am gonna let the most recent ones get the better of me and give it to Skabbix. I can see them getting a really fun Mastery War Scroll to go along with a Resurgence as well. Okay, so that makes my most likely candidates Eyes of the Nine, the Gnarl Spirit Pack, Wormspat and Skabbix from this bunch. And as far as most likely, if we don't get all four or even more than one, I think I would put my money on the Gnarl Spirit Pack, solely for that picture on the community article, and they are really recent as well. Okay, so as for the in-rotated warbands possibly going out, we have Spiteclaws, Dread Pageant, Kagras Ravagers, Drom, Eflin, Thrithful Discord, Sikits and the Gardeners. Out of these, the Gardeners and Sikits I would take straight out of the equation on merit of warbands coming in this season, and I would also deem it unlikely that the warbands in the Grand Alliance box gets touched, but to a lesser extent. And to not get repetitive, this is sort of my reason all along this video, of course. We are then left with Spiteclaws and Thricefold. None of these are totally safe, but I don't really see the Thricefold going away soon. They are much more recent, they are very strong and also very popular. They are not problematic strong though. Scritch, on the other hand, could well make place for Skabbix or Skitterchanks, and I sort of hope they do, honestly. It's hard for me to say that Scritch has been one of my favorite warbands from the first edition of the game, but they are in a sad state in the current edition. Not only weak, but just not very fun to play. Let's move on to Death with a total of 5 less warbands than Chaos as of making this video at least. Out of rotation are currently the Mournflight, the Wraith Creepers, the Exile Dead and the Sons of Velmorn. So yeah, if we do think new Grand Alliance boxes are coming, there is your list. If we take a more cautious approach, however, I think the Exiled Dead and the Sons of Velmorn are the more likely warbands to get chucked in. Sure, they do belong to the same faction, but they are vastly different in terms of looks and board present from what we currently have in the Crimson Court and Sundara's Gravebreakers. Both the Mournflight and Wraith Creepers are not too unsimilar to something like the Headsman's Curse, and I also personally feel I don't really care much about the sort of Cloth Bearers. My number one on this list in terms of wishful thinking is probably the Exiled Dead. Yes, everyone is raving about the Sons of Velmorn. While I think they are probably the most likely to get back in, I was never really crazy about their mechanics. Sure, the models are ace and a lot of people bought them solely for the models, but the Exiled Dead trumped them in terms of mechanics, and I could see them being a really fun gang to move around with a well executed Hold or Mastery War Scroll. So while it's feasible for all of the 4 warbands to get chucked in, Sons not least on the merit for that picture I talked about and the fact everyone's mad about the models, and Exiled Dead on merit of being unique design space wise and a fairly new kit as well, are my top picks here. Currently in rotation for the Death faction are the Sepulchral Guard, Thorns of the Briar Queen, the Grimwatch, the Crimson Court, Canaan's Reapers, Headsman's Curse, Sundara's Gravebreakers and the Skinnerkin. So if Velmorn gets moved in, it's not unlikely the very old sculpts of the Sepulchral God gets axed, and although this warband are sweethearts of a lot of old-timers, I wouldn't mind as much. Their war scroll isn't very inspiring to me. Thorns is another gang I could see move out on merit of not exciting me very much and sort of not making a huge impact in 2.0. I could see them go. Grimwatch is very popular and was also in the Grand Alliance box, so I don't see them going away, although they are older sculpts. Plus we only have 2 Flesh Eater Courts warbands after all. Crimson Court, super popular models, and albeit a big disappointment in 2.0 mechanic-wise, they were also in the box, so I think they'll stay around. Canaan's Reapers, same there really, and even to a greater extent given they are the sole representatives of the, to me, very ugly faction of OBR. In fairness, I did like the theoretic cohort for Warcry, but I'm really not a fan of the sort of cartoonish OBR aesthetic as a whole. Too much sort of skeletal vibes with the faces going on for me. Headsman's Curse, also in the box. They are doing well, a fun thematic warband, a fairly new kit that fills the role of an elite Night Haunt much too well to get axed or sworded, I guess, in favor for the derp creepers, who are really ugly models. Sondara's Gravebreakers, not in the box, but I find them a bit too sort of unique of a warband to get touched. I sort of hope so, at least. I would be really sad to see them go, even if their War Scroll is nothing like their old selves with their very sort of thematic rival deck. Skinnakin, a controversial take here. I could see them go, honestly. I like the sculpts, but they aren't doing too well currently. But also given the size of the Death Grand Alliance, I think they'll stick around a bit longer still. So my top candidates to go here are the Sepulchral Guard and Thorns of the Briar Queen. Of the two, I think the Sepulchral Guards are more likely candidates to go, not least on behalf of Velmor, very likely going the other way. Let's move on to Destruction, an equally small Grand Alliance currently as the Death one. The out-rotated list here consists of not a lot of warbands: Iron Skull's Boys, Rippa's Snarlfangs, Rothgorn's Mantrappers, and Headcracker's Mad Mob. So there's your Grand Alliance box, but let's sort it out, cause this won't happen. And this is solely for the fact that the Mad Mob belongs to a faction no longer part of the AOS setting. And by the way, I forgot to mention that with the spoilers as well. Same sort of story there. No Beastmen anymore. We have 3 pure orc teams currently in rotation, so I find it highly unlikely that the Iron Skull's Boys will research. Also, they are really old sculpts, not on par with the newer stuff. Rippas, I can very much see them getting back in. They do have rules in the new AOS tome, and with Sun Gobbos in the mix now, these fit right in to get a resurgence. And with their unique follow-up attacks and all, they could shake up the elite team meta, I think. Rothgorn, I think this is also a fairly likely warband to find its way back, to put more men in his sack. Got a rhyme off. He is also featured in a new Spearhead. Big quotation marks on that new, though, since a lot of the ogre models in that Spearhead are really old and the faction direly needs a refresh. We only have the one ogre warband currently in rotation, so this makes sense as well from that perspective. Okay, so the list of the in-rotated warbands from the Destruction Grand Alliance reads as follows: Sawbags Gits, Morlock's Mob, Morgoth's Crushers, Cunning Crew, Black Powder's Buccaneers, the Loon Court, Dagok's Stablads, and Borgit's Beast Grabbers. So a total of 4 Gloomspite warbands already in rotation. And with Rippas snarling at the sidelines, I think it's likely that one has to go. And of these, I think it might be Sarbags. Morlog is super iconic, and the Loon Court are in the Grand Alliance box. Beast Grabbers are way too new to get out-rotated, and also really fun, so I don't think they will be touched. Sarbag has been a heated warband from the start, and a very problematic one at that. And the new update didn't do very much to change their place at the top, not least because GW is unwilling to sort of change actual stats on fighter cards. They all inspired it to dodge, basically have a ton of fighters packing 2 damage, and even 3 in a 9-man warband. A not so elegant solution to this issue would be to simply out-rotate them, and I honestly wouldn't mind. They've had their moment. Let's pass the torch. As for Orc warbands here, we have Morgoth's, Cunning Crew, and the Stablads. Out of the 3, I think the Cunning Crew have sort of been the most disappointing one, and as the older one of the 2 Cruel Boys warbands, I would rather personally see that they go, but I don't think GW will touch them because they are in the Grand Alliance boxes, which I think they will still want to sell. But it also depends on when the rotating out will happen, of course. Morgok fills up a reasonable elite aggro spot here, well suited for the greenskins, and I don't see them going away. The stab lads are sort of a rather bland warband in my opinion. I was really underwhelmed when they entered the scene, basically just for gut rippers, straight from the rank and file units of the army, albeit with a big ass horn, and on merit of not being in the Grand Alliance box, I think they will be the ones going rather than Cunning Crew. And I honestly don't care too much either way. This game has been riddled with a ton of orcs from the start, so we have enough anyway. As for the only Ogo warband with the Buccaneers, it's not gonna go. It's just had a pretty significant glow up with 2 abilities giving the pirate access to 2 damage via range, and the warband fits like a glove for the edge of the knife rival deck as well, and has done pretty well recently. So that is it for destruction. I can see Rippers holding hands with Wrothgorn and together cross the Rubicon into the warmth of organized play, while shucking the busted Sarbags and the bland lads out. Let's move on to our most numerous Grand Alliance. It's time to restore order. In this Grand Alliance we have the following out-rotated warbands. And brace yourself, this is a lot. Steelheart Champions, the Chosen Axes, Stormsize Cursebreakers, Skaith's Wild Hunt, Morgwaith's Blade Coven, the Starblood Stalkers, Elathine Soul Raid, Storm of Celestus, Sandai's Truth Seekers, the Chadeborn, Grisel's Arenae, and Domitan's Storm Coven. That is a lot of warbands they've chosen to axe, pun fully intended. So let's group these into their factions. So we have a shit ton of Golden Boys to start us off. Steelhearts, Stormsize, Celestus, the Bestus, Truth Seekers, and the Coven of Storms. We certainly don't need more Stormcast in my opinion. We have 3 already in rotation, which is reasonable for the flagship faction I guess. So if anything is going in, something also has to go, in my honest opinion. My money is on the Storm Coven to go in here. Stormsize is a similar warband, but with far uglier and older fat cast sculpts. I also don't see Celestus making it back in. They're sort of really bland. They were sort of old fat sculpts already when they first arrived, with the Derp Creepers in that rather weird starter. Steelhearts is of course iconic. I really like the leader model, but they are also sort of fat casts, and while I can see them kicking out something like the Iron Souls who are of a similar age, I also don't really see the reason to do it. As for Sandire's, yeah, it's possible that we get 2 in-rotated Stormcast warbands, but that in my opinion requires 2 of them to go out, which I will come to isn't necessarily that unfeasible. Sandire's are certainly more flavorful than something like Iron Souls. The Chosen Axes, yes, they are old, but they are the only warband in the faction and they need to come back to find that Urgold. The runes on the butt-naked dwarves yearn to get stoked in the flames of Embergard. Skaith's Wild Hunt, oh yes, a lot of people love these rather unique Kurnothi brand of the Sylvaneth faction, and they would certainly be a popular warband to get back in. I am totally rooting for these guys, pun intended. Again. Sorry. Then we have a whole swath of Daughters of Cain warbands that all got ritualistically killed to my surprise. I find it still really weird to axe all 3 warbands from this faction and then introduce, in my opinion, far inferior sculpts and the chromes. I think at least the Shadeborn should make it back in. If GW wants to axe Dark Elves from cities, getting Shadeborn back in to usher in a new Umbraneth faction makes perfect sense in my opinion. I'm not sure they actually are Umbraneth, but they really feel like Umbraneth. I have no big hope for either of the more upfront and personal warbands of this faction, sadly, even if I really like them both, especially Morgwaith with more varied miniatures. The Starblood Stalkers, absolutely. We only have 1 Lizard warband and it's an elite aggro one, in stark contrast to these Dangle Bros. I can see them having both a hold or mastery war scroll with interesting time warping mechanics. Elathine's Soul Raid, oh yes, same as the previous one. We only have one Idoneth warband currently, and the Duin Claw and Spinefin are humongously popular models that a lot of people probably want to get back in the thick of things. The only thing going against the likelihood of them re-emerging is perhaps the warband size being of a very similar nature to that of Kyrienes. But with Spinefin they could rock a rather different war scroll more geared towards mastery or something like that. So to sum it up, Chosen Axis, Charbel Stalkers, Shadeborn, Storm Coven, Skaith's Wild Hunt and Elethine Soul Raid are all reasonable to get rotated in again. Of these ones, I think the Storm Coven is probably the most likely, but given the size of the Grand Alliance, I think we could have a fair few coming back here. So the in-rotation list for this faction reads: Fast Riders, Thunderix, Iltharis, Iron Souls, Mayaris, Hexbanes, Kyrene, Brethren of the Bold, Emberwatch, Jaws of Itzel, and the Knights of the Crones. Let's just remove the Grand Alliance ones together with Itzel and Crones straight away, and we are left with Fast Riders, Iron Souls, Kyrenes, and Brethren of the Bold. Both Kyrene and Brethren belong to a low representation faction, so I don't see them going, while both Fast Riders and Iron Souls do face the axe here. Of the two, I think Fast Riders are the more likely to get axed, but I could see both of them go. Fast Riders are basically the diluted version of Emberwatch, and I don't really think they justify their place here, even if they, in my opinion, are really cool sculpts, and I mean, I don't really mind them. So yeah, that is the complete breakdown. When, if, and how the rotation will happen, of course, remains to be seen, but it's definitely an interesting thought process to have, to me at least. And who knows, if we content creators wish hard enough for these things, maybe we can influence GW to some minuscule extent. Do make sure to leave your thoughts down below. I'm gonna roll the member appreciation thing now, but make sure to have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye. Lastly, a big shout out to all my members that help support my content and makes it so much easier for me to produce multiple videos on a weekly basis. Members do get access to the member Discord, get to influence the content, get early access to a ton of videos, as well as get featured in the monthly painting showcase if they want. Member or not, I dearly appreciate the like, the comment and the subscription.